Thank you guys for being here tonight. For these artist talks, they can often be intimidating, but I've done a couple of them, and it's great to kind of get into the process and kind of where my thinking was when I created this collection. Many of you may know the photographer Marissa White Sparks, and we were talking at the opening, and she said the artist talk is like peeling back the layers of an onion. So let's peel back some layers. Thank you to Kevin. So grateful to show with you. Your work is amazing. I've been a big fan of yours for a long time, and I'm so inspired by you. So I was grateful to show with you. And a big thank you to Abby and Gunday for having me. I'm so honored to be one of your first exhibits in the new space. A few months back, you had asked some people for a word that reminded us of these spaces. And without hesitation, the first word that I thought of was community. This place, G44 Kreuzer, is so much more than a gallery. It's a place for people to connect and share stories through art, through poetry, through dance, through all kinds of things. And thank you for being the seed that has kind of brought everybody together and be in that place. So I'm grateful to you guys. Tonight, a bit about my paintings of trains, what is benching, because my show is called The Art of Benching, and a talk through some paintings. And then my favorite part is questions. So have some questions ready. Let's see. I've been inspired by trains since probably high school. Growing up in the Springs in the 90s, there wasn't a lot to do. So in high school, what we would do is walk around, take pictures. We would take pictures of buildings and back alleys and things like that, but we would always end up at the train tracks. So underneath the Colorado Bridge, before this Colorado Bridge was actually fully created. And we would get down there and take pictures. And I always knew one day these pictures would turn into paintings when I got better. Because I felt like at that time, I was not ready. And then about 12 or 15 years ago, I started to retake photos for art. On weekends, I would go running downtown, and I'd run through the neighborhoods and take pictures. And that's kind of what my source material was. I'd go home to my studio and paint them. One Sunday, I was running downtown, and I ended up at the tracks, and it had snowed about 6 inches. And I got to this lookout spot at the tracks, and there was a giant coal train kind of just sitting, almost meditating on the tracks. And I instantly took a picture and came back home and started painting it. Well, at that time, about 12 or 15 years ago, I was painting faster than I actually had resources for art surfaces. So at our house, we had a lot of doors and things like that my wife had wanted to take off and kind of open things up, and they were in the garage. So I started cutting them in half. And kind of full circle now, 12, 15 years later, I still have a couple more of those surfaces, and it's kind of an homage. We're actually selling our house. And my wife actually asked me when we were putting our house in the market, where are those doors? And I said, they're on people's walls. So this painting is probably one of my last surfaces, and then this one back here, last surfaces. So they're doors. So they're hollow core doors. And so I just, you can YouTube anything, right? Once you cut it in half, you have this hollow space, and you just get another piece of wood, patch it, and it's great. I was like, man, maybe I need to go down to the Arc or something and get some more, because I love them. And I love them because they're flat. I used to paint a lot on wood. So, yeah. Let's see. So some of my first pictures were of coal trains. Coal trains don't sit very long. And so the first trains that I was taking pictures of didn't really have graffiti on them. They go north and south past the coal, and then they're just moving really, really fast. And they also really don't make it to the coast, and that's where a lot of graffiti artists live. So my first trains didn't really have graffiti on them. And then a couple of years ago, I started getting interested, finally finding some graffiti. And one of my shows a few years ago was called Boxcar Conversation, because I was like, whoa, they have the graffiti on there, and they're talking with the trains, they're talking with the markings that they have. And I really got interested in graffiti. So much so that this summer I became interested in a train graffiti group on Facebook, and I would follow people taking pictures of trains all over the country. And it's amazing because you'll see graffiti in one place, say in Ohio, and then someone's like, I saw it over here in Kansas. And it's really, really awesome. Um, it travels, yeah. And so recently they just posted an article about benching. And I was like, what's benching? Well, benching started in the 70s in New York. Guys were painting graffiti on subway cars. And then in the 80s, it actually became outlawed. So they moved to trains. Graffiti artists would sit on benches and watch people spray or just watch the trains go by and go, that's great, I want to do that. So benching is this kind of term that just kind of solidified what all those guys were doing, watching everybody else making art. And that's, when I read that, I was like, that's me. Because I would go down to the tracks and be like, oh, there's one right there. You know, and I've gotten to where I can actually kind of time it, and I know when they're going to be there. To add a layer into this show, I really focused on different kinds of trains, different shapes, different functions. I still have some of the same ideas that I first started with in looking at like an image like this. It really makes me think of people looking at each other. But for this show, I really was interested in shapes. So like you have this car right over here. It's called an auto rack. And it actually holds cars, and they're taller and bigger than most box cars. And then the cool thing is they have all these little dots in here, which are ventilation, but they're also so the conductor can look in and see which way the trains or which way the cars are parked in there. So when they take them out, they know which way to go. Let's see. One of my favorite trains that I painted, you can't really see, it's over here. It's a yellow box car. I'd actually found in a neighborhood. I mean, often when I'm going benching looking for these trains, I'm looking down over here, right? Down by Giuseppe's Depot. But this one was actually in a neighborhood. And I was running by it and I was like, what? And this train was just sitting by itself and it was actually chained to the tracks. And both of the sides were open. And I was like, felt like because I wasn't at the rail yard, I could get really, really close. And I took a lot of photos of it. I even went back and visited it again. And then a week later, it was gone. But this train ends up twice in my show. So when you get done, you can look at it right here. And you can almost see some parts of the chain that was below it. And then, let's see, this one right here, that's the back end of it, which you almost never see, right? Because that would be a caboose or something like that. So I have a lot more photos to do on that one, for sure. Let's see. Halfway through my show of painting trains, I was editing some of my photos, and one of my trains that came up, I turned it into black and white image. And I was like, whoa, that's something. And so normally when I paint, not just trains, but other things, I usually do like 4 paintings at once. And when I saw this one image in black and white, I actually just put everything aside and focused on the black and white image. And it was this one right here. It was something about how the blue sky turned black and the cold steel turned white. I was like, whoa. And I could not stop. And then after that, I started looking more for images that would have that same contrast. And I kind of did some of those, incorporated some of those. This one over here, the hovering image, I did it twice. I first did it in black and white because I loved it so much. And then I was like, well, I'd like to do it in color too because it had some really bright colors. So I did it again. Let's see. Oh, the best thing about, I think, about finding that Facebook group online with benching is being connected to other artists. Graffiti has connected people in ways that you just don't even know, like from New York to California. And it's connected me with graffiti artists too. There's an artist that found me on social media. I had no idea who he was. His name's Pound Dog. And yeah, and he found me. And since then, I've noticed his tags all over Colorado, and he lives in LA. So this is his tag right here, Pound Dog. There is a bit more that adds to it here, but I had to sneak it in kind of to honor him. And in fact, this train did have his tag on there, but it was more in the middle. So I cheated just a little bit and moved it over. Because normally when I paint trains, I paint them completely as they are. Someone had asked me one time, do you take out or move things? No, I usually just paint them as they are because I feel like I'm kind of just in honor of them, documenting them. Just the beauty of the way they do them. They make a mistake, if they make a drip, if they make something too big, too small, it's fine. Like Pound Dog, now that I follow him on social media, I've seen how his tag has evolved from big to small to adding a dog into it and lots of other things. I think that's about it. Thank you guys for listening to my story. I really appreciate your support so much. Thanks to my family being part of my benching obsession. I couldn't do it without you guys. And a big thank you to my wife for those doors, because none of this would have ever happened. So if you guys have questions, I would love to engage in questions. If you have any ideas about, or any questions about process or imagery or, well, for me, anything that I paint is usually something older with a story. And I love mechanical things. I paint some neon signs, so I love the way they work. I love the nuts and the bolts, and I also love the rust too. So anything like that has my heart. For my last show where I did a bunch of neon signs, I talk about my grandfather being a big influence in me. He was a steel worker and worked on things like that, and I was always in his back shop watching him work. And so anything mechanical, I just love. So trains kind of feed that. But there's also this element of pop art too. I'm a big pop art person. I love, when I was growing up, Warhol, Claes Oldenburg, Rosenquist. So anything pop, I just love bright colors. Like in college, we weren't allowed to use colors like these. And no, and now I can use all of them. I use every single one. Yeah, I feel like my style is kind of like Old Master meets pop art. Like, yeah. And it's amazing when you find a train. I now get like a rush. Like, whoa! I'll be going to get my daughter at Holmes Middle School, and I have to go under the Uinta Bridge. And if there's a train there, I turn, go take a couple photos, and then go get her. I know for my last show that I had in here, Neon Arcade, I was kind of running out of actually train photos, and I was like, man. And I felt like maybe because the coal plant had kind of gone away, that maybe we're not going to see as many trains. And on a whim, I went by the tracks when I was delivering my art for Neon Arcade, and there was a train. And I spent too long taking photos of the train. I was like, oh, this is it. This is it. So often when I paint, when I paint them, they're often similar size, similar shape. But like finding this one, I was like, what's going on here? In college, I mostly painted portraits. I mostly painted people. So, yeah, for sure. I got commissioned to do a caboose, and finding a caboose is very hard. So I went down to Fountain, and they have one kind of where my grandparents used to live. And I painted that, and I actually added Pound Dog on there. And looking through these groups, you're actually not supposed to put graffiti on cabooses and engines. Those are off limits. Yes, there is. Not that everybody follows that etiquette, because I've seen some marked up a little bit, but that's usually off limits. I think it's just respect. Like, we'll let you do these, because we may not be carrying them all the time, but this is my home. Like the lady that I painted her caboose for her, it was her dad had worked for the Canadian National train system, and that was his home for most of his life. Yeah. So they just put stipulations on it. And I've seen anywhere from conductors say, yeah, go for it. I don't care. I just need these numbers, to people saying, that's not cool. So, I think it just depends.
There is this respect and interest.
Yes. And I've also heard if you're going to paint over someone's tag, you have to be able to do it better. And if you can't, don't do it. So you'll often see, like, I don't know if you can see in any of these, like you'll see little scribbles and stuff people sometimes use with markers and stuff on the side of the train, and those often get covered because it's all about time. If you're in the place and you have some time, man, I can make something look like this, but I don't have time. It's got to be quick. Yeah, it depends. I mean, I've read both sides, so yeah. Yeah, I mean, some people really put some time in it. I don't know if you've ever seen. There's someone who painted a giant Homer Simpson on the side of an auto rack, and people are going nuts for it. Like it goes across, and they're like, "I saw the Homer. I saw the Homer." So, people love it. I know. Oh, I know, right? Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, and I start to like some of the. I mean, I love the Santa Fe Railroad logo. I mean, it's so classic. You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for being here.